I know you're the blowing.
Yeah.
Right. So, when we start then with
Kathleen.
Kathleen, will you start with your family and where they came from and how they arrived?
I was born and reared in Ballyconry, about 4.5 miles outside the town. And I was educated in Coolnessmere and in St Mary's here in Dungarvan. And then I worked in Waterford in the insurance for over a year. And then I came back here to Dungarvan. My sister, who was here before me for 14 years, was getting married. She was with my aunt. And then I came back here to my aunt in early 67.
And your mum and dad, could you tell us who they were?
My father was Thomas Kiley, Ballyconry, Dungarvan, County Waterford. His sister was Minnie Kiley, who was my aunt here in this shop. My mother was Catherine Helen of Scart in Kilbrine.
Okay. And you were brought up in Coolnessmere?
I was brought up in Ballyconry and I went to school in Coolnessmere.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from your childhood, just to stay with you for a second, like, would you, as a child, would you come into Dungarvan much?
From the time we were able to, I left Coolnessmere School at the age of 10 and I came into St Mary's in Dungarvan then.
Okay.
I cycled in and out to school every day. And my mother, I remember at home, it was a horse and cart we had and a trap. My mother had a lovely little trap that she used to go to town shopping. We'd go to mass in this little horse and trap. And in later years then, we got a prefect car. That was the first car we got. Mummy and Daddy got a prefect car and Daddy drove that only.
And did you have a farm?
We had a farm in Ballyconry, yes.
And would you remember coming into the fair days and all that?
I would, and I'd remember all the pubs in Dungarvan, because when they sold the animals, they stayed in the pubs until they were put out. And there was a rule in my house when I was a child that I wasn't to come home without my father. And then on the Saturdays there would be a calf mart up in the square, and I'd have to go to that and come home. In them days then, we would have our radio. Dinjo used to be on the radio, and our radio would be run by a battery that you'd have to get recharged over in Hurley's shop that is over there where Chris Kelly is now. They used to charge batteries for old radios to put the radio going. And I'd have to come to town because if my father had a few drinks, he wouldn't be able to bring that home.
Okay. And you said that you have to make sure to bring the father home.
Yes.
Where would he be? What pub?
Tommy Powers at the Square was a favourite pub. And then if you want to hide in me, he'd go to Mary Street and Maisie Drohan's. But that'd be no good because on the way home we would always have to stop at Tommy Helen's there as well. So we might get home a fair night. There'd be no lessons done because once I got my father home is all that mattered.
And obviously
when my father first got the car, I never drove because my father learned to drive, and he was some driver, I can tell you. And when he'd have a few drinks taken, he didn't know any rules of the road. I'll always remember one evening going up the 4 crossroads and he drove straight through the crossroads. I thought I'd never get home. There were characters in them days now, really. Tommy Helen's was my uncle, and there was a favourite pub in Kilgobnet. I spent a lot of my childhood there, funerals and that. I'd have to go over and give a hand to Tommy to organise all the people when they'd be in from the funeral. Yeah. They were great days now, and we used to pick blackberries, and my brother used to kill rabbits, and we used to bring them over to Tommy Helen's in them days, and he used to buy them. And there's a man come to my mother at home. He would buy the turkeys and he would buy the eggs. Grant from Clonee. Yeah, he used to drive a lorry, and the milk lorry. Paddy Flynn and I beside, and Bertie Keane used to collect the milk. insurance from a stand at the end of your road in them days. Yeah.
And Frank, when did you come in on the picture? Because I know you're a Cork man, is that right?
Yeah, I came to Dungarvan around 67, 68, I suppose, within the building line for the building of Quigley and Magnus, which is now West Waterford Golf, or Ballincorty Golf Club.
And how did the two of you meet then?
Oh, we can't tell you that.
If you want that, you can have it.
It's a state secret.
State secret.
They've never told me, so it'll be news to me if they'll tell you anyway.
Or that one, that's a big
So
I came from Dungarvan, actually.
say again?
I came from a place called Dungarvan,
Okay.
West Cork.
Were you from farming background?
No, we had a very small bit of land in do you know Dungarvan?
I know of it.
No, of it, yeah. The story goes there, one place said he had a grass of 4 cows and he had water for 300. That's the kind of farms in West Cork.
And did you like Dungarvan when you came?
Obviously I did. I retired from the building line and I went working for Quigley Magnus for 12 months and I came back into the business then instead. We were when we got married, I worked there for about 12 months after getting married. I came back to the business then when Pat was born, so I'm here since.
And Pat, you can tell us then, what's your earliest memory of growing up here?
Very different from what it is now in layout and everything else, because when Dad came home first, they bought Bailey's newsagents up opposite the church. So Dad had the newsagents opposite the church is now Albert McGrath's. And the shop here, my earliest memory, this as I say is much, much different from what it was. We had a shop in property that went from the front door to halfway down Scanlon's Yard. If you look on Scanlon's Yard now where the credit union gate is, our property would have gone back that far. My earliest memory was the shop came as far as the steps of the stairs inside, so the shop is about 20 foot long, with a kitchen behind it, with all decrepit, falling down old stores and bakeries out the back from a previous time, with a yard behind that again. Big, as everyone had at the time, everyone had a yard at the back of their property, so that was back in the mid-70s, and over time then, as the shop expanded and people's tastes changed, the shop extended to the bottom, what we would call the front shop now. We had a hallway up here because this property where we're standing now is actually our landlord's property, and then we built a showroom, and when we built the showroom then we built an additional store onto it for bikes, and then about 2 years later we built another store on for more bikes. Because bikes were very, very big in the 70s and in the early 80s because the petrol crisis. A lot of people who before kind of said I have my car and I'm fine suddenly said, you know, I need this bike because this could happen again between, and my memory would have been of after the petrol strike, but with bank strikes and various things like that, there was a lot of people kind of getting very self-sufficient again and kind of saying we need bikes and we need, so we would have got into bikes and into that end of things around just when we'll say, you know, the demand was there, and so my early memory childhood was of big shop. Seemed very big at the time as a small child, and bikes and deliveries and huge staff, as was the nature of the time. We had at one stage we had a staff of about 18 because you had so many people that did individual jobs. We had so many casual workers in the early 80s in particular. You had a lot of people who worked part-time that couldn't work full-time, or you didn't have full-time work, and between that and the news agents, my parents would have been working 16-hour days because you had to open a news agent at 8 in the morning, you then opened your toy shop at 9 in the morning, you closed that at 6, and you had your news agents going until 10. So there was a lot of people, and we'd still be in contact with a huge number of those that worked with us, and some still do. Our longest serving staff member was our first staff member. I like to say I'm here longer than her because I was 3 months old when she arrived. She did a lot more work in the first years than I did, I'll be honest. But over time we would have had probably the bones of 60, 70 staff that would have passed through, and some have gone on and opened their own business, some have gone on in different directions, and some have gone all over the world.
And did other children resent the fact that you had all these ties?
Yeah, there was a belief there was a belief that we could play with everything. There was a belief that we got everything. And the reality was probably, certainly from my perspective, the reality was very different, because it meant as a child we never got a present of toys from anyone, because why would you bring sand to the beach? So they all kind of felt, you've loads of toys, so we wouldn't have necessarily got toys as presents. And when it came to bikes, I would say in my childhood I probably had 100 bikes, because I was generally given a bike and came back in the day after school and thought, we sold that, this is now your bike. And we sold that and this is now your bike. So we would have had huge turnover, and that was taken as a given. Everyone kind of said, God, you're so lucky you got another bike. And said, no, they sold the one I liked, and I now have this brown bike, or I now have this green bike, or whatever it was. So.
And to go back to your mum, so, your family, the whole family connection to this shop.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know that's a very interesting...
Ellie Fitzgerald worked in Williams' office down in the Quay.
John Phelan's.
John Phelan's now. And then when she was quite young, she was going with a crotty man in Abbeyside for years at that time. He worked down there as well. And she rented this premises here. And she opened a meal store and a bakery. And the crotty man went to England, to America then, to make money. They were going to do loads of things. But in the meantime, anyway, he stayed in America for years, and she married a man by the name of Augie Foley. He was...
No, she didn't marry him.
She married Corner, Hugh Corner. He was an ex-policeman. And then he died, and she was a widow for years. And the crotty man from Abbeyside came back from America in bad health at the time. But they met up again, of course, and they used to be seen in Clonea every Sunday evening in a horse and trap. So they remarried, and he died after 3 months. But he came home to marry her, he said. Crotty man Abbeyside, yeah. And then my aunt, Minnie Kiley, who would be her niece at the time, came in, was here with her. So she stayed here all her life. And then my sister Peg, who's married in Dunhill with a family now to Peg Corn, she was here for nearly 14 years. And then I came after. My aunt was very upset when she was getting married. I didn't want to leave Waterford at the time, but Peg's case was, but you have to, because Mammy and Daddy are on their own. And I said, sure, John is at home. I mean, they're not on their own. But your John wants to be going out and he's getting married. You have to come home. So I had to leave Waterford and come home. So I came back to Dungarvan then.
And Tom said that at the time, this street had a lot of really powerful businesswomen running the shop, running different businesses.
Next door to me was Mary Jo Marrow. That was next door, a little small shop. Mary Jo Marrow used to work in there. And who was the little woman with the bike? She used to deliver all the papers. There was a little old woman who used to work there. Next to her was Conniff's. There was a toy shop in them days. And next to that was John Casey's, who is the florist now. In the older days, that was a very different store. Then the Gow Maloney's, as we called it, was next to that. And then Haddon's was next to that, which is now Shaw's. And in the corner was Jack Keown's. That was a paper shop. Lovely man, lovely character, Jack Keown, who would have still family here in Dungarvan now. Angela Keown is down in Williams' office. She'd know a lot of the history. On the other side of the street then you would have Stacks. You would have Welch's. Bernard Welch owned it where the L&N is. Maloney's was across the road where Maloney's is where the McCarthy men is now. So you had you had Welch's, you had Stacks, you had what was the name of the pub?
O'Neill's.
The Gib O'Neill's pub. You had a closed place then. Jack Flanagan's aunt was there. Scannon's was over the door. Next door to that would be Phelan's. They had there was an Ellie Phelan, and then the brothers were barbers. And then next to that was
John Phelan's
no, it was Williams's. No, it was Williams's in my day first, and then John Phelan's after that. Next to Williams's then was, of course, the famous Sheehan Ryan. Oh no, Meg Downey was where Rich Rags is.
Ruffles.
It was Ruffles after that, but Mrs. Downey and Mary I would have known them years ago. They had a drapery store there. Next to that would have been Sheehan Ryan's. It was a very famous chip shop. Next to that would have been Delaney's drapery. Next to that would have been no, before the Criterion was
Criterion.
No, there was somebody before the Criterion.
William Foley's is above it.
No, the cousins of Eileen's. Who was that man now? There was people there before the Criterion in my day, in my early days. I'm 71 now.
You had, of course, in that then you had, in that particular property, that was the Criterion, which was an early version supermarket.
That was kind of the first supermarket.
And the best thing we ever got out of the Criterion was Eileen, because Eileen worked over there for a while and came across to us. And then after that, it became a pub, a very famous pub.
Would you drink there?
No, before my time.
Yeah, but you wouldn't drink there.
Before.
It was never known as its given name. It was known as was the trend at the time and all the rest of it with in the early 70s, men with long hair and beards and all the rest of it. It became known as the Monkey House. And if anyone said there was a fight last night, where was it? Oh, it was in the Monkey House. And up beside that then was William Foley's.
William Foley's, yeah.
Which was a kind of a pork butcher stroke. It was a pork butcher stroke vegetable shop, but very old school. You'd have half a pig hanging in the window and a pig's head sitting with an apple in his mouth in the window, and health and safety wouldn't certainly be popular with how they did it, but they did it, and they were. Beyond that then was, I remember it as Maloney's Crystal Shop. I don't know what it was before that.
In the early days, that was Morrissey's Drapers. Paddy Fraher, a man by the name of Paddy Fraher, up in St. Gavin's Terrace, was in the men's department. Oh, we forgot a shop down there, Jimmy Coffey's. Jimmy Coffey's draper store was after Stacks, wasn't it? Yeah. Before the pub. Yeah.
Very popular with country people.
Yes, very popular.
But a real old school haberdashery.
And that lady
kind of
is 104 and she's still alive, Mrs. Coffey in Waterford. Yes.
And come here, I presume this place was chock-a-block at Christmas time.
Yeah. It was. We would remember, from our perspective, obviously, we'd remember individual years, or you'd always remember a Christmas for that was the year of
a particular product.
It could be the year of Cabbage Patch Dolls in the 80s, turtles. We couldn't get turtles for love nor money. We managed through, and of course communication and everything was much worse at the time, and international trade and all the rest of it didn't exist except for big companies. We managed on about the 18th of December to get turtles. People came in and we actually thought they were going to blow us out of the way to get these, and they were just little boxes, but that was a craze. And we would remember crazes going back on the bikes. We'd remember rally choppers and communions, fellas getting racing bikes, but Christmas would be a particular run for us, and we remember it in other ways as well. I had a brother born on the 19th of December. That was a particularly hard Christmas because, as has always been the case, your mum and dad are central to everything, particularly at Christmas. And of course, when mum was away for a couple of days, which you have to be.
It's a crisis.
Well, no, she arrived home to a crisis. She arrived home with a baby and into a crisis because the whole thing was kind of very hot, as you can appreciate. She arrived in the 23rd of December with baby. Just had to hand over baby and kind of see we had, as happened, all the staff had flu that week. They were all walking around, doing their best, but walking around like zombies. And we had, at the time, that particular year, we would have had hawkers. Wouldn't be a feature now at all, but Christmas week, the week before, we remember a lorry arrived from the north, and of course there's exchange rate all the time, and when you're a lorry you don't pay rates and you don't pay tax and whatever, so he opened his side door, and toys at the time were not anything like they are now. But he opened up, and yeah, we'd have felt for a few days, yeah, do you know what, there's someone else selling ties in town, because where did the people go for a few days? So we'd have seen that. But we looked at another history project. We're involved every year in the shop windows, the heritage windows, and we found an old ledger we found older ledgers, but we found a ledger from the 70s to do with the toys. We found older ledgers that did with grain and bread and all people would get, and in the older book it was always the case no one ever seemed to pay for anything up front. Everyone seemed to come in and everyone had their account, and you went in and settled your account, and then if you were a farmer, based on your fair day or based on your turkeys at Christmas or based on whatever, you came in then you settled up your account. But again, no one ever cleared their account. They kind of brought it fairly up to date, and away you go again. And I even noticed my grandfather was in the book with his sister, and I could tell when my uncle took over, because Tommy Kiley's account was paid off and John Kiley's account started, and away we go again. But we found the toy book from the 70s, and a lot of people like Damien wasn't named in it, but certainly his mum and dad would have been named in it. But what people got was, because as we keep records now as well, people got a cowboy set or an Action Man or an Evel Knievel or a doll but children were getting one thing. Santa brought me, yeah. You know, and it was small, it was modest what they got, but we went back and saw that, you know, people got a Cindy doll, or they got an individual item is what they would have got. Obviously that's changed a lot now, but that would have been
the norm.
That would have been the norm, yeah.
And Frank, you mentioned earlier on about the fair days here, the market,
Yeah.
up in the square, and you mentioned the fact that you still have a tap.
Tap is inside the door still for washing the street after the fair. It didn't function, no, but it's still there. You could have a look at it. It's still there. If you look inside, just inside the door, screw on tap where they'd wash the street.
And what's your memory of those days?
Oh, I remember horse fairs. Do you remember horse fairs? I remember the horse fairs. I don't remember the cattle fairs in the square. The horse fair, I remember they used to have the horse fair in the square up to about 25 years.
Yeah, that's right. Then it moved to Quans.
Moved to Quans, yeah.
Was that a lively day?
That was an awful day. An awful day. You had fellas from Limerick and Limerick, Tipperary, Wexford, you had fellas from all over the country there.
Okay.
But the horse fair now is cleaner though, isn't it, really?
Much better now.
With the drink driving that now, they just get out of town like on the around 2 o'clock because they can't afford the chance driving, but that time there's been
Pubs will be full until closing. Then they'll all come out with horse boxes and head off in a kind of a waving caravan out the road, and you go.
And what's your memory of the actual market day? You know, when you said your father used to go in.
Oh, half crowns. You'd be getting half crowns from all the fellas be trying to sell pigs or buy cattle. My father would leave home that morning at about 4 o'clock with a horse and cart with creels in it, and he'd bring maybe 8 or 9 bonnets into the fair to sell them. And then if there was calves, it would be on the Saturday, there was a calf market, and you'd bring in the calves and stand above in the square and walk around, and everyone that would be buying would be inspecting the calves they'd want to buy and that. But you'd always get a half crown from whoever bought from Daddy. I used to get half crowns in them days now.
That was like a good look thing, was it?
Yeah, good look thing. And then they would go in to have shake hands for a drink, and that, of course, that was the beginning of the end. They stood inside in the pub, and then until you could bring him home, I would a lot of the time come down here to Peg and try and get a sandwich and bring it up to Dad to know could I get him to leave the pub and come home, but I couldn't ever. In them days then Diggy Flynn and a lot of other people would be in the pub, so he'd always have to be waiting for somebody else to bring him home. It was always a big excuse, bringing home somebody else.
And would you remember any of the characters around the square at that time? Like, would there be any people outside?
Well, I was very young now. I'd only remember people that Daddy would be with on the day, like, really, you know. And Mrs. Tommy Power of the square now was a lady. She was a lovely woman. And she'd always make sure that she'd give me a cup of tea in the evening, and I could sit in the little snook and do my homework if I wanted to, because I'd have homework done for a week while I'd be waiting. Then I couldn't come back down here to my sister Peg and tell her that we still weren't gone, because my aunt would be really cross with my father to be still in town. Whereas Peg and I would be putting up with it, we'd know that was the normal thing. But my aunt would be, oh, I'll go up on that bowdy, he should be got home to that poor woman this hour of the night.
And come here, when you actually moved in here then, what was your memory of, we say, the leather factory and other, like the co-op over, like what was your...
The co-op was a great big industry in the town. In my younger days, to pass Wise's caravan park, they had a caravan out there where the mart is now, Wise's. And they were lovely old people, but they always had dogs and that, and then a lot of other travellers joined them as well. So there'd be a lot of travellers on the road. And there was a lovely man used to walk out every morning out to the crossroads to bring us into school. He used to say he was the manager, he was the head man in the creamery.
Foley.
No, Maher. What was that? Tin man.
Maher.
Maher. He was the head man in the creamery. He used to go for a walk. He'd have been in an hour at that stage, and he'd walk out, and he'd walk in with us, pass all the things in the morning. Yeah. And then if it was a wet morning, then days we had capes, and you'd have it over your handlebars of the bike and everything, and we'd leave our bicycles into Powers. There were the railway station over there, and there was a railway station, and
then to the car park, to the dump.
Yeah, and we used to leave in all our wet clothes to them. And then at home, when we would kill a pig, we'd always have to bring in a pudding and some bacon to them, because they were so good to us. And then when Mammy had killed the turkeys, they would always get a turkey at Christmas time from Mammy, but we'd be sent in with it from the trap to give it to them, because they looked after loads. Like I had my brother and two sisters, 4 of us used to be coming into school together in them days. You know, we used to cycle in to school, and they'd a wet day you could leave all. People were lovely in them days. Now I remember when I'd be going home in the evening in the winter time, there was a big forest in the Kilgobnet Road in them days, and I could meet any of the drummies, I could meet all the forestry men, and they'd always walk back with me, because there was a lot of squirrels in the place at that time, and they'd always walk past it until I'd get past that place where all they were, you know. Yeah, they were lovely people. You could leave your bike in, if it got flat, you'd leave it into D's. BDD and Eddie were above at the cross. Vales were across the road. You could leave your bike in anywhere, and they'd have it repaired for you in the morning even, and you'd walk home the rest of the way. You had real neighbours, you know. They were just really very nice people on the road.
And Frank, as a blow-in, did you find that people were welcoming here when you first...
I got on very well in town. I got on very well. As I was saying to Damien, when we got married first, there was an amount of people in the street who weren't talking to each other. An amount of them, bar down to 2 or 3. Everybody in Main Street now is talking to each other. Every shop in Main Street talks to each other now. Every business person does. You could, Finola could run up to the computer shop. The Chisel Beans could run down here for a change. We could go across to McCandy's. Everyone talks to everyone, everyone works. Great cooperation in Main Street now.
And like recently, like you've had the development up in the square, have you, like, how has that impacted on you? Would you see it as a good development, or where are you at on it?
From a tourist point of view, we find that the country people talking to them, they're scared of their life to park there, because there's these spots in the square, they just can't see them. They're about as big as that. You know, a lot of people are afraid to park in the square. Find a lot of people.
It is very rude to say it, but we're becoming very much a tourist town, and our traffic wardens and that need to treat it in that way and have more manners towards strangers. I'm very against that. You know, if you get a job to do, you need to notice that we're becoming very much a town that we have a lot of visitors, and we should not, if you go into visitor towns, they want people to be very welcome, but at the same time teach them the things not to do rather than summons them. I will say that out loud to anyone. You know,
traffic wardens are the public face of the council.
they are really, you know, and they should be brought in and educated, yes, to keep the laws, but there's a point where you should be careful.
Absolutely.
It's becoming very much a tourist town, and I'd love all the people, the head people in the council, to try and bring that forward for the town, because after all, we really only can live in one house and have one living, but we need to treat people properly.
And Tom, you mentioned too about how big bicycles were years ago, and now here we are full circle with the Greenway in it.
Yeah.
And obviously now we're back into a situation where bicycles are back in vogue again.
Hugely so, and we would notice, as anyone would anecdotally, that tourist numbers are up since the Greenway opened, definitely, but we would see a huge increase in cars coming with bicycles hanging off the back of them. Not something you would be used to seeing, but it's actually a thing now, and a lot of people I would know around the country have come to the Greenway, have been very impressed with it and all the rest of it. So it's different, because the bicycles that we would have sold 40 years ago, and up to 30 years ago or so, they were functional. People bought bikes because they have to go to work, and every house, like most people stayed at home until they got married, so every house had 3 and 4 bikes, because you had 3 or 4 fellas working and they had to go to work every day, and the father might have the car, but bikes were functional, but they've become a very different thing now. They're not the same functional item anymore. From when we would have been selling bikes, people bought the middle of the road, great, good bike will last. As Dad says, there's one man in town that will make him bankrupt, because he's still cycling a bicycle he bought from him 30 years ago, which is no
37 years ago.
Yeah, which is no good for us. Whereas now, people they actually have to be encouraged to get on their bikes and all the rest of it. It's much more a leisure thing and a fitness thing, and where we would have had people buying the middle of the road bike before, because that's what they could afford and that's how they went about it with various government schemes. Now nobody buys a middle of the road bike anymore. With cycle to work schemes and various things, everybody has a good bike now. Everybody has a top of the range. Just where lifestyle has gone, and the way, and there was a facility there for people to do it, so it became a very different thing. But we would have seen, as you asked earlier, because as a child I would have remembered the leather factory, and the 2 memories I would have is, number 1, you'd see the men going down in the morning and coming up at lunchtime, going down in the afternoon, going up in the evening, and everyone had a bike to start with. But the other thing, unrelated to the bike side, was my memory of the leatherworks was big, sprawling, very old Victorian buildings, and here in particular, because this was the main artery down to it, you could smell at the back of the shop when the hides would go down, because the hides, when they were cut off the animals in the slaughterhouses, they were thrown in the corner until they had. So you had rotting flesh and the whole lot on the thing going down, like there was an awful stink of it. And they put chemicals into it that would strip paint off concrete for you. And so we'd get the finished hides coming up then, and there's a very strong chemical smell of them passing up. But you'd get, on the one hand, you get these horrible hides and in the sun, in this summer weather. They could be sitting in a slaughterhouse for 2 months to get a collection, and then they come down, and it was like the old dump, as we would remember. You get an awful smell of it as they go down. And then when you went down, all down beyond the castle, right over as far as the lookout, even where the Tannery restaurant is now, there was sprawling old buildings, some very, very old buildings, but there was, and as all you met was forklifts going from one side of the road to the other carrying, and all the men had old clothes and big heavy aprons and all the rest of it, because the work was dirty work.
Jim Veal now would still be alive. Jim worked down in the leather factory.
There'd be a few.
My father worked there for 13 years.
There'd be a few down there, but certainly in town, the jobs.
That was hard work.
It was. There was a good job, there was a cushy job, and there was a hard job.
And it was never known as anything in Dungarvan, only the factory.
Yeah, but the leather factory was hard work, and all the men who worked down there worked very hard at it. The creamery was a good job, and then the glass was a great job.
Oh yeah.
In terms of what
it was a dirty job, but a good job.
Yeah. But they were at the time, the people who worked down there, they were. I'd see them coming up in the day like dirty from work. They worked, and whereas you'd see fellas coming out of the glass factory and you wouldn't know they were going into work or coming out of work, because the nature of the work they did was different. Such as
but obviously when the glass factory closed, it had a big economic impact on it.
Yeah, but it's gone tourists, mainly tourists now. Thinking back when I came to town first, I think there was only one restaurant. You know where that was?
The Enterprise.
Yeah. I mean, how many restaurants are in Dungarvan now? There was a couple of chip shops, alright. There was McDarty, the chip shop. You remember that?
Do Shane Ryan.
Shane Ryan's and the Square Grill. That was
right.
it.
Yeah.
And didn't Tony's
Tony Whelan had one for the
Tony
little while.
Whelan's wife, didn't she run away?
No, it's all restaurants.
Yeah.
But that's a change of lifestyle. because-
Total tourist town now.
Yeah, but once upon a time, people only went out, not even once a week. You know, whereas now, lifestyles have changed, people's priorities change, and their incomes have changed, and all the rest of it. But certainly, I would just very barely, I would just remember the dying days of Sheehan Ryan's. They were a big family across the road who were involved in all sorts of things. They had a ship. They imported their own coal from the UK during the war. So they had a big
They
ship.
were the elite of the town.
And they had toy making, and they had a coffee shop, and they had various things, and one of them was a doctor. But over time things moved on, and they became older men, and they didn't necessarily move on. But the chip shop was their latter enterprise, and it was a big long shop with timber flooring inside, and a big long counter,
Sawdust thrown in it.
sawdust on the floor, and the two up at the back serving, and with a dirty old white coat.
Poor Kitty and Philomena.
Yeah, and they were serving up at the back, and you'd have a huge crowd. Like when they'd open now, you'd have a huge crowd out the road, and out the door, and all the rest of it. But suffice to say, health and safety they'd just leave the country if they were asked to go into.
They
Because
were beautiful people.
but we ended up buying the front part of the shop from them 26 years ago now, and they were old men living there at the time, and as part of, we were neighbours of theirs before we ever bought it. Like, we helped them to pack up and to move out, and we were renovating the premises, and the collection of stuff they had stuff going back in the house, they had stuff going back over 100 years. They had magazines, they were hoarders of their time. They kept everything, and you went in, and we went in, and the hallway, up along the hallway, there was boxes piled high, boxes, and you'd open a box and you could find a magazine, one episode every year going back 60 years in one box. Open the next box then, and it could be just rubbish. You go on the next box, it could be a bag of ashes. You go on the next one, it could be a vase. You had no idea. There were people who just collected, and of course, when they had the chip shop over, Willie was very temperamental, and when he was good form and good crack, it was all great. But of a night then, if something went wrong, Willie could just tear out, we're closing, get out, and he could close for 3 months. And then he kind of calmed down again. He'd open up again, and you could have a fight in the middle of it, as would be not unusual. And if you were inside the counter and the fight broke out between you and the door, you just had to wait for it to finish because you couldn't get around it. And they had the ship. They had to bring in the coal, was the parting. And when we went to meet them, I don't know as a child, but when we meet them to buy the stuff, or to buy the property from them at least, they were saying, the parting, and they show you in the middle sitting room, that's a lamp off the parting, and you're going, right, okay. And you have various places, but it became uneconomical then to import and to keep the ship docked below in the quay, so they brought it out into the bay and they scuttled it, so it was still out there. They just went out and they blew a hole in the bottom of it and came in, and that was it. That was it then, that was fine. And gone. They had the coffee shop was years and years ago, but Doc Ryan then was Willie's brother. He was a trained doctor, but the two of them lived across for years and years, but they had famous parties. Again, you wouldn't know, but if the local dramatic society had something on, and they go over to Lawler's Hotel, the two boys would land over in the middle of it.
I'd say your mother now could tell a lot of stories about that.
Yeah, they'd be the life and soul of the party, and they'd leave the party then about 11 o'clock. They'd come over and turn on the pans, do up trays of chips and trays of sausages and all the rest, would bring it back over to the hotel. The party keep going until 4 in the morning. But when we cleared out, we saw more evidence of parties than you'd believe would be seen in a hotel. They were great characters, but they were very funny. They were very funny men in their older age, because both of them believed they were much younger. And Willie, we were putting in a piece in the shop. We were renovating downstairs, and they were moving out the following weeks. And Willie was upstairs, and they'd come down and see how you're going, and they kind of, oh yeah, I remember that wall, and I remember my father did that and whatever, and that was all fine. But they ended up upstairs one day, and we were putting in a support actually for the ceiling. And we put in, so we were there, so we'd men working, so we put in the girder anyway, we lifted it up and put it in anyway. And all of a sudden you heard something fall upstairs. Looked up and there was a teacup broken on the table. And I said, are you alright? I said, oh yeah, I said, but the floor moved, and so sorry, we lifted something below. And Willie said, oh, that was fine, but I spilled the tea into my lap. He said, I nearly got my bits. And he said, like, and I'm going to need them again. Like, and he was a man well in his 70s at that stage, but he was confident, he was... Poor Willie. And
He wasn't finished yet.
yeah, well, he didn't believe he was finished yet anyway. He certainly didn't, but they were...
Oh, they were lovely characters in that. That was
But
great.
he had, but they were in their own way. They were very, very clever, but they're also very eccentric. And they got it into their head at one stage. There was the water main that was going up the inside of the door, the water pipe going up to the building, and the smallest little leak came in the pipe, and you wouldn't even see there's a spray of water. But Willie was convinced when he came down in the morning, there's a puddle of water inside the door. Willie was convinced that was someone was going home from a pub at night and they were relieving themselves. Now, just logistically, the letterbox was about that high. Like, it would have been quite a feat, but he was convinced it happened anyway. So he'd come over and he'd tell us.
The knife behind the door would be clear.
So he had a knife behind the door. He was going to sit one night. He was going to wait. He had a knife. He was going to sort it once for all. Thanks be to God, no one ever.
Didn't decide to relieve themselves.
Oh, they were characters.
And speaking of characters, I mean, what are characters would you remember from, when you first, way back?
Oh,
There was
Mrs. Ducey.
Mrs. Ducey up the road from us was a beautiful lady, but she was a real character. She was a very nice lady.
We used to sell groceries here, very small bit of groceries, and the Criterion over had a system. They never looked at their invoice. There'd just be penny cheaper in the street. So a rep came along one time, he had a wicked Daz, so he sent a cat. Should buy 20 outers of it. There'd be such demand for it. It's costing 26 pence, I think, and you can sell it at 32 and you'll make a wicked profit on it. No, sorry, 16 pence. It was 16 pence. I said no, because man across the road, he's going to cut it anyway. So we put it out on Thursday evening at 20 pence. So Danny McGovern, he works with Thomas Wiltshire. Oh no, he's not. He lives at the...
I know, yeah. His brother works for Tomas, yeah.
Yeah. He was sent around to check the prices. He said they have Daz across the road at 20 pence. So Kevin Darcy went in. Kevin, do you remember Kevin? He was hair lip. He said, Mark, that's 19 pence. So the girls mistook and said they thought it was 9 pence. So they stamped, he was buying it at 26, they stamped it out at 9 pence. So someone said there was wicked value in Criterion. Daz sprayed them on, they were all rushing, but Mrs. Dewson across the road. You're all talking about the Daz, how much is it? So the girl said 9 pence. All I have is 8 pence is enough for it. And he bought it at 27. He went burst, he went into liquidation, the other way.
And you said she was a lovely lady. What did you do?
Mrs. Dewson.
She used to do dinners and that up there. Was it a restaurant? It was, I suppose, really, and a pub. Yeah. But she just was a very, very nice person. And John Ducey was her husband. He was in the bar, and they had one son, then James. Dad. But they were very nice people, really, yeah, I'll go with it, okay. They were very nice people, really, the Duceys.
What's that, just 6 inches?
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, you're just filming us in the middle of a work day, so if people have to go for lunch and that.
No, we're just finished now anyway.
Yeah, that's okay.
So
now we have 5 other children here as well. Pat is the oldest boy, and then there's Tom. He's married in Burncourt in Tipperary. Then I have a son in Grattan, England. I have a daughter in England. I have a son in New Zealand. So they're all left home now.
And I suppose the shop is unusual in the sense that a lot of people in Dungarvan would know the shop by 2 names.
Oh, they would, yeah.
They'd say, like, going to Frank Murphy's or Kathleen Kylie's.
Kathleen Kylie's, yeah.
Well, it was very funny when Frank was up in Mitchell Street. He was always in Mitchell Street a lot, and I used to be down here. And they used, what was it, one day one of the children said, they didn't want to, they were going down to Kathleen Kylie. They'd never have connected us even in them days.
But we would have children coming in now. Like, David's children would be coming in and would be going into Kathleen Kylie's. Now, she hasn't been Kathleen Kylie in Damien's memory, never mind in theirs, but still and for all, like, a name sticks in it. Yeah.
But in later times then you would have people like Joey around the square and around the street.
There was a man over in William Foley's as well. He was a great character. Joe Mull, he was a great
Joe
character.
Mulcahy.
Joe Mulcahy.
Joe
Yeah, Joe was a great character.
But we would have had, as the nature of the shops changed in the street, as not only the shops changed, the personalities changed as well. So we would have had, like when I was very young, I would have remembered the Washateria, I'd remember Mrs. Hill's, Mulcahy's, DSB, Ducey's obviously. The shop next door to us, Cinder's now. I remember it as about 6 different things.
And what about you the swimming pool down below?
Yeah.
You have much memories of that?
Some. I actually live down close there now, but swimming pool was something that
Kirby.
Yeah, the swimming pool was something because it was an outdoor pool and it was tidal, it was fed from the tide. It was something that really only kind of had 8 weeks of the summer, and even at that, if it was a bad day, common sense would say it wasn't that, it was someone's job. Common sense would say, well, it didn't open if the weather was bad, but if the weather was good. But again, old school, and if you think about it, we had a swimming pool. And we had the leather works 200 yards away, discharging what they were discharging into the water, but still, we survived.
Would you remember other events up in the square, like the
Corpus Christi?
Religious things? Right?
Yeah, Corpus Christi you would remember as a particular event, and it was something that was very adhered to by the people who attended, obviously, and everyone who made their communion they got a second outing for the communion outfit because they went to the Corpus Christi because just so soon after, and all the shops on the route, regardless, you'd have to cover your window for its commercial goods, and then everyone, because most shopkeepers lived over the shops at the time, it was a bit of a competition that, that lovely old-fashioned antique table we'll put that out, we'll put a nice cloth on it, we have that nice statue. So everyone put flowers and statues, and that would have been the full route of the procession you would have. And even houses themselves would have done it. They would have put out their bits and pieces, but times change and different things change, like the route isn't anything like that now, and to be honest, now it would even be a case that a lot of places wouldn't even close their door. If they were operating on that particular day, they would just continue to operate and say, oh look, this is different time.
There used to be a kind of a festival in the square as well. What was it called? The Gala? The Gala.
Gala Week.
Would you remember that, the Gala Week?
There was a flag queue. That was, I think, a year or two before my time. And they had wicked preparations for it all together, and the weather broke and it didn't turn up. There was fellas broke for years after it. There was houses that never in. They made sandwiches and they had brought in a load of gear, and they had no sandwiches for, we'll say, to cater for 40,000 people. There was about 2 turned up, so the whole lot was dumped. And what year was that? Usually?
Late 60s, I'd say.
It was late 60s, yeah. I think the year I was coming around the time.
And the galas, would there be much crack around during those, or would you remember?
Yeah.
Maybe before my
But
time.
there was only the Gala Week. There was only one flag queue really of consequences. There was only one real flag queue in my time. I only remember one real flag queue. That's only about 20 years ago, I suppose, is it?
A lot of people still talk about Gala Week and that, but it's something that just kind of fizzled out, I think.
Fizzled out,
time. Yeah. It was going from the 50s into the 60s.
It was, yeah.
Kind of went around the
Flag queue, the flap queue, they called it. That wrecked everything.
I think then what came in maybe afterwards, maybe you had the dance halls and you had that type of thing.
And tops of the towns and that sort of thing became.
But
But
it's one of those things that fizzled out,
But it was also, and I would certainly remember as a child, that a lot of the things that kind of came, because they were new and they were different or whatever, people kind of, embraced, be it, as you say, dance halls or cinemas or whatever, they were all a thing, but they had their time. But now, everything's gone so fast. Like once upon a time, and Damien would remember that when a movie would come out, you'd hear to be out in the States, to come to Dublin maybe 2 months later, and maybe 2 months after that it might. I think they brought in maybe 12 reels to the country or something because you waited your turn, whereas now, instantaneous, everything is launched. And we even see it here in the shop, like that if a movie's out on Friday, children come in from the movie and say, do you have the figure from that, and do you have it? And in general you have to have. There's no...
How do you keep on top of the trends with toys and that? Is it kind of demand-led where children will come in and look for something and then
You're told
two sides.
shows that's going telly, that's being advertised. Okay. But I suppose when you think what took off in 72 for the social union, the one thing that stayed going and nobody thinks is minis. Minis started around 72, I'd say. They bought that around the 70s. And it never failed, did it? Minis always held the crowd.
That's always took the disco and then nightclub now, and
Yeah.
had live bands there in the 80s and that,
Yeah.
70s,
Yeah.
But like everything, it's swings,
No, it stays-
swings and roundabouts that have had.
They stay going though.
Evolving all the time.
Of course.
Yes.
Well, that's what you do. That's what we have to do. You have to keep. But as you said there'll be a certain amount of it demand led. A certain amount of it we'd have a good indication, but you still have to make a call as to. They tell you six different people tell you 6 things are going to be good. They're not all going to be good. Now 4 might or 3 might, but so you have to use a bit of judgment, and you have to. But it's getting faster, constantly getting faster. Once upon a time we could predict out 12 months. Now you have to kind of say 3 months maybe. But that's life. That's once upon a time people had to. If you wanted to get something after 10 o'clock at night in town, there was nowhere to go. You couldn't get food. You couldn't get anything. You couldn't get. Now if you want it, you can get anything at any hour of the day or night. That's just the way we live now, I suppose.
Another one of the great characters in town, we don't think of him, he's dead no good, no, he was poor Harry the Whistler.
Yeah, Brian. That's right.
He's a beautiful whistler. He was fabulous.
He worked in the leather
He
factory,
worked in the leather factory, yeah.
and after his mother died, he never whistled afterwards.
Never whistled afterwards, no.
Yeah, he could whistle arias from operas for you.
He was class.
You'd hear him on the street in the night, and
Yeah.
you'd hear the whistle coming in.
Just so distinct that you'd actually think he was outside the door, but you go to the door and he could be up at the far end of the street because he was so practiced at it and so good at it. That
Who was also a good singer was Remy Burke.
Raymond Burke,
He was a good singer.
was he? Yeah.
Yeah, was, yeah.
And Peter.
And Peter.
Peter was a great character, yeah.
Yeah.
Said Bowman was telling you about Peter.
I'll tell you a good story about Peter. Peter, once he went to a pub, he was a beautiful entertainer. Once he had a price of a pint to go in, he was strutting for the night, he was entertaining. But he had this famous dog, this pointer. Did you hear about the dog?
What?
The dog was famous anyway. So the boys, they went out to the woods shooting. So the dog was never known in his life. So therefore they shot the dog and the one he got lost. So they were 2 or 3 days looking for the dog and no sign of him. So they came back about 2 years afterwards and met Peter and asked about the dog. So Peter, he said, you spoiled it now. He said, I was just forgetting about him. 6 months ago, he went out to the wood and he bought a couple of his old pointers and he went down, where was the woodcock? The bones him up in the tree, where was the dog? The bones him on the ground looking up at the peacock.
Yeah. He was a good dog. So listen, lads, thanks very much. I wonder, can we get a couple of shots? Like, you were talking to tap.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We get a shot of that. And you mentioned about the ledgers. Do you have any of them to hand, or are they?
I'd have to go look. To be honest, I'd have to
So
go
we'll
look.
be back down next week.
Yeah, no. In the meantime, I'd certainly have a look. I would have. Yeah, I'd have all ledgers. Yeah.
Just reference. When you're talking about them,
Yeah.
you could just get a shot of them. And you're looking through them and all that.
I'll see, can I find a net gig from the 70s and see what you bought for Damien?
Set of drums. I can remember a set of drums, yeah.
Yeah. But that was it. Like you got. Yeah, you got one.
One of the characters.
Oh no, it was your sister, was it? That's all.
One of the
right.
good characters in Dungarvan was total tourist. Dungarvan was total tourism. One of the characters, he was a banjo player. When the English people come in, they were very law-abiding, so they want to pitch a tent, so they'd be going after pitch a tent, and then they want to hold him, buying a few drinks from him, and they say, where can we pitch our tent? Anyhow you like, and I say, all around here is mine.
So do you want to go?
That was brilliant, lads.
That
was excellent, yeah.
And I can start taking things down. Yeah, take really good.